Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a long, slow ride across vast steppes, over mighty mountains, and through windswept deserts, all to uncover a truly incredible feat of ancient engineering and logistics. We're traveling back to the time of the Mongol Empire, an era often associated with fearsome warriors and swift conquests. But beneath the thunder of hooves and the clash of swords lay a surprisingly sophisticated, almost unbelievably efficient system that bound this colossal empire together. Their management of mail with relay riders, known as the yam. Imagine, if you will, being a messenger in this empire, carrying vital news across thousands of miles, relying on a network of tireless horses and dedicated riders. You probably won't survive the mental image without appreciating just how much harder it was to send a text message back then. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're up for it, drop a comment below with where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing on a windswept plateau, the endless sky stretching above you, broken only by the distant shimmer of a mirage. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of dry grass and the faint, earthy aroma of horses. Suddenly, a speck appears on the horizon, growing rapidly into a galloping rider, leaning low over their mount. This isn't just any rider. This is a yam rider, a vital artery in the immense circulatory system of the Mongol Empire. The ground trembles faintly beneath your feet as they approach, their face grim with purpose, their eyes fixed on a distant point. They carry not weapons, but knowledge, commands, and secrets, the lifeblood of an empire. A mainstream historical fact is that the yams, also spelled jam, was the Mongol Empire's sophisticated and remarkably efficient postal system, established and perfected during the reign of Genghis Khan and his successors. It was designed to facilitate rapid communication across the vast territories the Mongols conquered, allowing for swift military intelligence, administrative orders, and reports to flow between the furthest reaches of the empire and its central command. It was, in essence, the ancient world's super-fast internet service, powered by horses. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the speed of the yam was legendary. European travelers, like Marco Polo, who experienced the system firsthand, were astonished by how quickly messages could travel. Reports suggest that riders could cover hundreds of miles a day, a speed almost unfathomable for the time. Imagine sending a message from Beijing to Moscow in a fraction of the time it would take any other contemporary system. It certainly makes your overnight delivery seem a bit slow by comparison, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the primary motivation for establishing such an elaborate system was purely military and administrative control, or if it also served as a tool for economic integration and facilitating trade across the empire. Was it purely for conquest, or did it foster a quieter form of commerce, too? Regardless, the yam was a monumental achievement, a testament to Mongol organizational genius and the tireless dedication of its riders, who were, in many ways, the unsung heroes of imperial communication. You'd watch the rider disappear as quickly as they appeared, leaving behind only the faint scent of horse and the lingering question of what urgent message they carried across the boundless steppe. as the image of the swift yam rider fades, your mind travels back to the very genesis of this remarkable system. The yam wasn't just a happy accident. It was a deliberate, visionary creation, conceived and perfected by the very architects of the Mongol Empire, most notably Genghis Khan himself. He understood that true power lay not just in conquest, but in efficient control. A mainstream historical fact is that Genghis Khan, after unifying the Mongol tribes and embarking on his vast conquests in the early 13th century, recognized that effective communication was paramount to governing such a rapidly expanding empire. He intuitively understood that a command issued in the capital needed to reach a distant general, or a report from a far-off province needed to reach him with unprecedented speed. The yam was his answer to this logistical challenge, a communication lifeline stretching across continents. You would imagine him, perhaps sitting in his gear yurt, tracing lines on a map of his burgeoning empire, meticulously planning the network of routes that would become the arteries of his rule. Now, for a quirky tidbit, while Genghis Khan is often remembered for his military prowess, the establishment of the yam system showcases his remarkable administrative foresight and organizational genius. He wasn't just a conqueror. He was a master logistical planner. The yam was, in many ways, an extension of Mongol military strategy. Just as armies moved swiftly, so too would information. Imagine him discussing the optimal distance between relay stations, or the best way to manage horse fodder. With the same intensity, he might plan a cavalry charge. It really changes your perception of a warrior king, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the initial design of the yam was a completely original Mongol invention, or if it drew inspiration from earlier, less developed postal systems in conquered territories like China or Persia. Was it a unique innovation or a brilliant adaptation of existing ideas? Regardless, Genghis Khan's genius lay in scaling it to an unprecedented level, creating a network that dwarfed anything seen before. You would sense the disciplined focus behind this creation, a reflection of the Mongol ethos of efficiency and total control. This wasn't just about sending letters. It was about knitting together an empire with invisible threads of information, ensuring that even the furthest reaches felt the swift hand of central authority. As you contemplate the strategic vision of Genghis Khan, your mind shifts from the grand concept to the tangible infrastructure that made the yam function. The numerous route stations, or these weren't just random stops. They were meticulously planned and stocked hubs, essential resting and resupply points strung like beads across the vast Mongol domain. A mainstream historical fact is that the yam system relied on a network of thousands of relay stations, typically spaced about 20 to 30 miles apart, or roughly a day's ride. Each station, whether a simple yurt or a more substantial mud brick structure, was provisioned with fresh horses, food, water, and often a small garrison of soldiers to ensure its security. You would approach a station after hours of riding, dusty and weary, the sight of its smoke rising into the sky a beacon of relief. It was like a meticulously planned string of ancient gas stations and motels, but for horses and extremely dedicated riders. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the responsibility for maintaining these stations and providing resources often fell to the local population, a form of tribute or service to the Mongol authorities. This meant that communities along the yam routes had a direct, often burdensome, role in keeping the imperial mail flowing. Imagine being a simple herder, suddenly tasked with ensuring that a dozen fresh horses and enough fodder were ready at all times for a demanding high-speed rider who might appear at any moment, day or night. It certainly put a lot of pressure on the local economy, didn't it? Historians still argue whether the imposition of these station maintenance duties on local populations was primarily a pragmatic necessity for such a vast system, or if it also served as a subtle form of control, integrating conquered peoples directly into the functioning of the empire. Was it an ingenious logistical solution, or a form of quiet subjugation? Regardless, the sheer number and consistent provisioning of these stations were monumental. You would hear the familiar sounds of horses being readied, the quiet chatter of station attendants, and the clinking of harness as the next leg of the journey was prepared. These stations were the beating heart of the yam, ensuring that no message, no matter how urgent, ever faltered for lack of a fresh mount or a moment's rest for its tireless bearer. With the yam stations meticulously laid out across the vast landscape, your attention turns to the human engines of this incredible system, the relay riders themselves. These weren't just ordinary horsemen. They were highly disciplined, utterly dedicated individuals, the very embodiment of Mongol speed and efficiency. Their lives revolved around the swift passage of imperial mail. A mainstream historical fact is that yam riders were exceptionally skilled horsemen, chosen for their endurance, courage, and unwavering loyalty to the Khan. They would ride at breakneck speeds, often covering distances that would exhaust lesser riders, switching to fresh horses at each jump without dismounting, simply leaping from one saddle to another. You would see their faces weathered by sun and wind, their eyes fixed intently on the path ahead, their bodies swaying in perfect rhythm with their galloping mounts. This wasn't a leisurely trot, it was a furious dash across the landscape. Now, for a quirky tidbit, to ensure maximum speed and efficiency, yam riders often carried very little personal gear. Their focus was entirely on the message. They might wear specially designed lightweight clothing, and their saddles would be optimized for long distance. Some accounts even suggest that riders would sometimes strap themselves to their saddles to prevent falling off during extended periods of sleep deprivation or sheer exhaustion. Imagine trying to catch a few moments of sleep while clinging to a galloping horse, effectively taking a power nap at 30 miles an hour. It sounds less like a job and more like an extreme sport, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the yam riders were primarily professional soldiers dedicated to communication, or if many were specialized couriers drawn from the general population, serving as a form of imperial conscription. Was it a military unit or a civilian service under military discipline? Regardless, their commitment was absolute. You would hear the thunder of their approach, the urgent shouts as they signaled for a fresh horse, and then the receding drum of hooves as they vanished once more over the horizon, leaving behind only a cloud of dust and the faint scent of horse and leather. These were the true, unsung heroes of Mongol communication, connecting an empire, one tireless gallop at a time. As you ponder the sheer endurance of the yam riders, your mind turns to their incredible mounts. The success of the Mongol postal system wasn't just about the riders' skill, particularly the unique multi-horse system that allowed for astonishing speeds across vast distances. Without the horses, there was no yam. A mainstream historical fact is that the Mongols were master horsemen, and their horses, though smaller than many European breeds, were renowned for their hardiness, stamina, and ability to graze on sparse steppe grasses. The yam system capitalized on this by employing a relay method. At each jump, the rider would switch to a fresh, rested horse, rather than riding a single horse into exhaustion. This meant that while the individual horse only covered a relatively short distance, the message itself could travel continuously at top speed. You would witness the seamless efficiency of the exchange, a fresh, eager horse immediately taking the place of a panting, sweaty one, executed with equine precision. Now for a quirky tidbit to further maximize speed and ensure horses were always ready. Yam stations often kept a substantial herd of reserve horses, sometimes hundreds, grazing nearby. These weren't just random ponies. They were specially selected and trained for high-speed travel. Furthermore, some accounts suggest that riders carried very little weight to lighten the load on their horses, perhaps even relying on a diet of dried meat or fermented mare's milk kumis that they could consume on the go, without needing to dismount for elaborate meals. Imagine a rider not even stopping for a quick sandwich, just grabbing a handful of jerky and leaping onto a fresh mount. It certainly emphasizes the express mail, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the yam system's high horse mortality rate, due to the intense demands, was considered an acceptable cost of imperial communication, or if measures were taken to manage and sustain the horse population. Was it a sustainable system or a resource-intensive one? Regardless, the strategic deployment of horsepower was revolutionary. You would hear the thunder of hooves, the excited whinnies of fresh horses, and the rhythmic breathing of the powerful animals as they covered mile after relentless mile. The yam was a living, breathing testament to the power of the horse, tirelessly connecting an empire that stretched further than any had before. It truly redefined the concept of horsepower. In ancient times, with the relentless gallop of fresh horses echoing in your mind, your attention shifts from the mechanics of the system to its very purpose, the messages and packages that flowed through the yam's arteries. The answer reveals the diverse needs of a sprawling empire. A mainstream historical fact is that the primary cargo of the yam system was, first and foremost, imperial intelligence and official communications. The Khan to his generals in distant lands, detailed reports from governors about local conditions or rebellions, and strategic updates on troop movements. Speed was critical for maintaining control over such a vast and often newly conquered territory. You would imagine the parchment scrolls, carefully sealed with imperial wax, being handed from one rider to the next, each word a potential decree of life or death, a shift in battle strategy, or a new tax imposition. Now, for a quirky tidbit, beyond official documents, the yam was also used, albeit more sparingly, for the rapid transport of high-value goods or unusual items destined for the imperial court. This might include rare furs, exotic birds, fresh fish from distant rivers kept alive in special containers, or even diplomatic gifts. Imagine a rider arriving at a station, not just with a scroll, but with a cage containing a chirping, brightly plumed parrot destined for the Khan's private menagerie. It certainly adds a touch of the absurd to an otherwise serious postal service, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the yam's use for non-military or non-administrative purposes was a planned feature from its inception, or if it evolved organically as the empire stabilized and its rulers sought to leverage their impressive infrastructure for personal luxuries. Was it always a multi-purpose network, or did its civilian uses emerge over time? Regardless, the system ensured that not only vital information, but also precious commodities could traverse the empire with astonishing speed. You would sense the profound importance attached to these packages, knowing that their contents, whether a strategic map or a rare bird, represented the distant reach and absolute authority of the Khan, traveling faster than whispers on the wind. As you imagine the precious cargo hurtling across the steppe, your mind shifts to the unique identifier that granted a yam rider unparalleled authority, the imperial paiza. This wasn't just a fancy badge. It was a physical manifestation of the Khan's power, granting the bearer absolute right-of-way and access to resources across the entire empire. A mainstream historical fact is that the paiza, or jerej in Mongolian, was a tablet typically made of bronze, silver, or gold, varying in size and material according to the bearer's rank and the urgency of their mission. Engraved with the Khan seal and often an inscription like by the power of the eternal heaven, the decree of the Khan. This tablet served as a visible pass that demanded immediate compliance from anyone encountered along the route. From local governors to station masters, you would see a rider flash this tablet, and immediately doors would open, fresh horses would be provided, and any obstacle would be swiftly removed. It was the ultimate fast pass, valid across an entire continent. Now for a quirky tidbit to ensure its authenticity and prevent forgery. The paiza was unique to the Mongol system. Its specific shape, material, and inscription were closely guarded secrets. Weighing several pounds was so heavy that riders sometimes strapped it to their belt, or even carried it in a special pouch to avoid the discomfort of holding it during their furious gallop. Imagine a rider, already enduring bone-jarring speeds, having to contend with a weighty golden tablet constantly clanking against their side. It certainly sounds like a prestigious but somewhat cumbersome accessory, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the paiza system was truly foolproof against corruption, or if local officials sometimes managed to exploit its power for personal gain, despite the severe penalties for abuse. Was it an infallible symbol of authority, or did human nature sometimes find loopholes? Regardless, the paiza was a brilliant innovation in imperial administration, allowing a centralized power to exert control over vast distances with minimal direct oversight. You would sense the profound authority emanating from this small metallic object, knowing that it commanded instant respect and obedience from everyone under the Khan's vast dominion. A silent but undeniable declaration of imperial will. It truly made every yam rider a momentary extension of the Khan himself. Section 8, with the paiza flashing like a beacon of imperial authority. Your mind turns to the ever-present dangers faced by these tireless riders and the measures taken to ensure the safety and security of the yam routes. After all, a high-speed postal system spanning continents is only as good as its ability to withstand bandits, rebels, and the sheer brutality of the wilderness. A mainstream historical fact is that the Mongol Empire maintained remarkable security along its main trade and communication routes, including the Yam. This was achieved through a combination of severe punishments for those who dared to interfere with imperial mail and the strategic deployment of military garrisons at or near Yam stations. Any attack on a Yam rider or station was considered an attack on the Khan himself, punishable by death. You would see the watchful eyes of Mongol soldiers at each jamt, their presence a silent but potent deterrent to potential brigands. This iron-fisted approach created an environment of relative safety, allowing messages to flow uninterrupted. Now, for a quirky tidbit to further enhance security and facilitate swift passage. Some sections of the Yam routes, particularly through more desolate or dangerous areas, might have been deliberately widened or cleared of obstacles. There are even suggestions that basic signal fires or flags were used in certain stretches to quickly communicate distress or clear the path for an approaching high-priority rider. Imagine a Yam rider seeing a distant puff of smoke, knowing it was a signal that the road ahead was clear, or perhaps a warning of danger. It sounds like an ancient pre-semaphore communication system, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the perceived safety of the Yam routes was truly universal across the vast empire, or if certain remote or newly conquered territories remained more perilous for riders. Was it a blanket of security, or did dangers still lurk in the shadows? Regardless, foreign travelers like Marco Polo often commented on the surprising safety of travel across Mongol lands, a stark contrast to the dangers found in many other parts of the world at the time. You would feel a strange sense of paradox, immense power and military might, creating a network of peaceful, uninterrupted communication. The wind might whistle past your ears, but you'd feel a peculiar sense of security, knowing that the Khan's watchful eye and his fierce justice extended even to the lonely stretches of the Yamdot. As you imagine the secure, swift flow of information across the Mongol Empire, your thoughts might turn to the immense and varied geography these tireless riders had to conquer. The success of the Yam was all the more astonishing, considering the challenges of terrain, the diverse, loused and harsh landscapes that stretched across thousands of miles. This was no gentle stroll in the park. A mainstream historical fact is that the Mongol Empire encompassed an incredible range of geographical features, from the vast open steppes of Central Asia to the towering mountains of the Himalayas, the formidable Gobi Desert, and dense forests in northern regions. A Yam rider's journey could take them through scorching heat, biting cold, blinding sandstorms, and treacherous snowdrifts. You would find yourself shivering in the icy winds of a mountain pass one day, and sweating in the oppressive heat of a dusty plain the next. Each landscape presenting its own unique set of obstacles for both rider and horse. This wasn't just about speed, it was about sheer survival. Now, for a quirky tidbit, to navigate these diverse environments, Yam riders developed specialized knowledge of local conditions and often relied on indigenous guides for particularly difficult stretches. Furthermore, the type of horses available at each jamt might vary, with hardier, more sure-footed breeds stationed in mountainous areas, and faster, leaner horses on the open plains. Imagine a rider accustomed to the flat steppe, suddenly having to expertly guide their horse along a narrow, icy mountain trail with a sheer drop on one side. It really speaks to their incredible versatility and horsemanship, doesn't it? Historians still argue whether the Mongol reliance on native guides and local knowledge for route planning was a strategic choice to integrate conquered populations, or a pragmatic necessity due to the sheer scale and diversity of the empire's geography. Was it a form of soft power or just good sense? Regardless, the ability to maintain such a high-speed communication network across such disparate and challenging terrains was a logistical marvel. You would feel the crunch of snow underfoot, the grit of sand between your teeth, or the piercing bite of the wind, a constant reminder of the physical demands placed upon these vital couriers. The yam was a testament not just to human will, but to the adaptability and endurance required to bind together an empire spanning so many different worlds. Having traversed the formidable terrains with our imaginary yam rider, your mind now naturally settles on the most astonishing characteristic of this system: its sheer speed. In an era when travel was painstakingly slow, the yam was a blur of efficiency, connecting distant points of the vast Mongol Empire with unprecedented velocity. A mainstream historical fact is that the yam system was capable of transmitting messages at speeds far exceeding any contemporary postal system. Accounts from European travelers, most notably Marco Polo, describe messages traveling at rates of up to 150 to 200 miles per day, and sometimes even more for urgent dispatches. To put that in perspective, a swift courier in Europe might cover 3040 miles a day on a good road. This meant that news from the furthest corners of the empire could reach the Khan in weeks, not months or years. You would stand in awe as a rider seemingly materialized from the horizon and then vanished again, leaving you to marvel at the impossible swiftness of their passage. It was the ancient world's bullet train, powered by pure equine muscle. Now, for a quirky tidbit, to maintain such incredible speeds, the system required not just fresh horses, but also a culture of absolute urgency. Yam riders were given priority on all roads and at all stations, with local populations compelled to provide assistance instantly. Some accounts suggest that the riders would even blow a special horn or wear specific identification to alert others to their high-priority status, ensuring no time was wasted. Imagine hearing a distinctive horn sound and knowing immediately that a vital imperial message was hurtling towards you, demanding that you get out of the way fast. It certainly made you appreciate the imperial urgency, didn't it? Historians still argue whether the highest reported speeds were typical for all yam traffic, or if they represented exceptional journeys undertaken by elite couriers on critical missions. Was it consistently that fast, or only for the most urgent deliveries? Regardless, the overall impression among contemporaries was one of staggering efficiency. You would feel the rush of wind as a rider thundered past, a fleeting image of blurred motion and focused determination. The speed of the yam wasn't just a logistical advantage. It was a psychological weapon, allowing the Khan to project his authority and react to events with a swiftness that left his adversaries reeling. It truly redefined the concept of rapid communication for its time. As you continue to marvel at the sheer speed of the yam, your thoughts turn to its profound effect on the very fabric of the Mongol Empire, its impact on governance. This rapid communication system wasn't just a convenience. It was the unseen sinew that allowed the Khan to maintain control over an empire of unprecedented size, making centralized rule possible across vast distances. A mainstream historical fact is that the Yam enabled the Mongol Khans to receive timely intelligence from all corners of their vast domain, allowing them to make swift decisions regarding military campaigns, administer justice, collect taxes, and suppress rebellions before they could fully escalate. Without the Yam, ruling such a sprawling empire would have been a near impossible task, prone to fragmentation and slow, ineffective responses. You would see how a single command issued in the capital could reverberate through provinces thousands of miles away within days or weeks rather than months, ensuring a surprising degree of uniformity in imperial policy. Now, for a quirky tidbit. The Yam also facilitated a rapid feedback loop, allowing local governors and commanders to send reports back to the central authority quickly. This meant that the Khan wasn't ruling in a vacuum. He had access to current, on-the-ground information, which was a significant advantage over many other empires of the time. Imagine a local official knowing his report on a regional dispute would reach the Khan in a matter of days, making him far more likely to be truthful and efficient in his duties. It was a powerful tool for accountability, wasn't it? Historians still argue whether the Yam's primary contribution to Mongol governance was its role in military command and control, or its more subtle function in fostering administrative cohesion and discouraging local corruption. Was it an instrument of war or a tool for stable civil administration? Regardless, the speed and reliability of the Yam profoundly reshaped the nature of imperial rule. You would sense the invisible threads of communication binding the empire together, a testament to the fact that true power in vast territories often comes not just from military might, but from the efficient flow of information. The distant whisper of a command, carried by a tireless rider, could reshape the lives of millions. As you marvel at the internal efficiency of the Yam, your thoughts might turn to how this remarkable system appeared to outsiders. For foreign visitors and envoys traversing the Mongol Empire, the foreign visitors' awe at the Yam was palpable, often sparking astonishment and envy in cultures accustomed to far slower and less organized communication methods. A mainstream historical fact is that European travelers, missionaries, and merchants who ventured into the Mongol Empire in the 13th and 14th centuries frequently documented their amazement at the Yam system. Marco Polo, in particular, dedicated significant portions of his famous travels to describing the elaborate network of relay stations, the thousands of horses, and the incredible speed of the riders. He reported on the great roads, the post houses, and the men who are perpetually going to and fro. You would imagine these foreign dignitaries, accustomed to weeks or months of arduous travel between cities in their own lands, being utterly bewildered by the Mongol capacity to send messages across an entire continent in a matter of days. It was like witnessing a technological marvel centuries ahead of its time. Now for a quirky tidbit. Some foreign accounts, perhaps slightly exaggerated, describe the Yam riders as almost superhuman capable of riding relentlessly without sleep or rest, their bodies fused with their horses. While we know the system involved relays of horses and riders, the sheer speed and efficiency created an almost mythical aura around these couriers. Imagine a European merchant having just endured a 6-month journey to reach the Mongol court, then seeing a yam rider depart with a message and knowing it would reach its destination in a mere fraction of that time. It must have felt like magic, or perhaps a terrifying display of an empire's absolute control. Historians still argue whether the detailed descriptions by foreign visitors were entirely accurate, or if they were sometimes embellished to emphasize the exoticism and power of the Mongol Empire to a European audience. Was it pure, objective reporting, or was there an element of narrative wonder? Regardless, the consistent reports of the yam's speed and organization suggest a truly impressive reality. You would feel the silent wonder of these travelers, their amazement etched on their faces as they witnessed the seamless flow of imperial communication. The rhythmic thud of hooves, the sudden appearance and disappearance of riders would be a constant, breathtaking reminder of the Mongols' logistical prowess, leaving them with an indelible impression of a truly advanced and powerful empire. It truly transformed their understanding of what was possible in terms of global communication. Like all great empires and their magnificent systems, the yam, despite its astonishing efficiency, eventually faced its own decline and legacy. The relentless march of history, the fragmentation of the vast Mongol Empire, and the emergence of new political realities ultimately brought an end to this incredible postal network. Yet, its influence lingered. A mainstream historical fact is that as the vast Mongol Empire began to fragment into smaller khanates in the late 13th and 14th centuries, the unified, centrally controlled yam system gradually deteriorated. The seamless continuity across continents broke down as rival factions emerged, and the collective resources and political will to maintain such a massive infrastructure waned. You would observe the once bustling stations falling into disrepair, the herds of fresh horses dwindling, and the routes becoming less safe and less reliable. It was a slow unraveling, a testament to how dependent such a system was on a single, overarching authority. Now for a quirky tidbit. Despite its decline, the concept and remnants of the yam system influenced subsequent postal networks in the regions that were once part of the Mongol Empire. For example, some elements of the yam were adopted by the later Muscovite state in Russia, where the word yamshek for coachman derives from yam, and even by the Ming dynasty in China, who built upon the existing infrastructure. Imagine the very roads and some of the station locations once used by Mongol riders being repurposed centuries later for new forms of communication, a ghost of imperial efficiency lingering in the landscape. It's like finding ancient fiber optic cables still being used, isn't it? Historians still argue whether the decline of the yam was primarily a consequence of the political fragmentation of the Mongol Empire, or if the sheer resource drain of maintaining such a vast system would have eventually led to its collapse regardless. Was it political instability or inherent unsustainability? Regardless, the yam, though no longer a unified continent-spanning network, left an indelible mark on the history of communication. You would trace the faint lines of its former routes on ancient maps, recognizing the profound impact it had on connecting diverse peoples and distant lands. Its memory serves as a quiet reminder of an era when communication truly galloped across the globe, leaving behind a legacy of speed and astonishing logistical foresight. Having witnessed the rise and gentle fall of the yam, your thoughts might now turn from its grand imperial function to its more subtle impact on everyday life connections. How did this relentless system of communication, built for emperors and generals, filter down and affect the ordinary Mongols and the people living along its vast routes? A mainstream historical fact is that while the yam was primarily an imperial system, its presence inevitably influenced the lives of common people. Locals were often conscripted or obligated to provide horses, fodder, and labor for the stations, integrating them directly into the empire's infrastructure. This meant a constant, if sometimes burdensome, interaction with the imperial power. You would see the villagers prepare for the arrival of a rider, ensuring fresh water was drawn and horses were ready. A regular rhythm imposed upon their lives by the needs of distant authority. It was a tangible connection, however indirect, to the vastness of the Mongol realm. Now, for a quirky tidbit, the very existence of the yam, by facilitating safer and faster travel, also unintentionally encouraged some degree of cultural exchange and even limited forms of civilian travel. While commoners couldn't just hop on a yam horse for a pleasure trip, merchants, scholars, and religious figures with special permits sometimes utilized the protected routes. This meant that ideas, technologies, and even culinary practices could travel faster than ever before. Imagine a local herder seeing a scholar from far-off Persia alight at a yam station, perhaps overhearing a snippet of a foreign language or witnessing an unfamiliar custom. It broadened their worldview, even if only in small, fleeting glimpses. Historians still argue whether the overall impact of the yam on common people was primarily one of burden and forced labor, or if the increased stability and occasional opportunities for trade and cultural exchange brought some tangible benefits. Was it more exploitation, or did it subtly enrich local lives? Regardless, the yam was a constant, visible reminder of the empire's power, speed, and omnipresence. You would feel the ground vibrate as a rider thundered past your yurt, a fleeting, powerful image that connected your quiet life to the grand movements of an entire continent. It certainly added a touch of drama to the otherwise unchanging rhythm of daily life on the steppe. As our journey with the Mongol yam system concludes, you're left with a powerful image of ancient efficiency and foresight. It's striking to consider how a system of horse-mounted couriers, centuries ago, laid down principles that still resonate in our modern world, particularly in the echoes in modern mail and logistical networks. A mainstream historical fact is that the concept of a relay system, where goods or information are transferred from one carrier to another at designated points to maintain speed, is a fundamental principle underlying many modern postal and delivery services. From the Pony Express in the American West to contemporary overnight shipping companies, the core idea of breaking down a long journey into shorter, manageable, high-speed segments remains remarkably similar to the yam. You can see the direct lineage. Your package doesn't travel on one truck from coast to coast. It's sorted and transferred at various hubs, much like a message changing horses at a jaw mount now. For a quirky tidbit, the Mongol emphasis on standardized stations, designated routes, and priority access for official communications also finds parallels in modern logistics infrastructure. Think of dedicated highway lanes for emergency vehicles, or the intricate scheduling of air cargo hubs that prioritize urgent deliveries. The Mongols, without computers or GPS, essentially created an early version of a highly optimized supply chain. Imagine the Yam Riders as the original priority mail service. Their paiza, the ancient equivalent of a do not delay sticker. It truly makes you wonder if efficiency is an innate human pursuit, regardless of the technology available. Historians still argue whether the specific organizational structures of the Yam directly influenced later postal systems in Europe or Asia, or if similar logistical challenges simply led to independent, parallel innovations. Was it direct inspiration or a convergence of logical solutions? Regardless, the Mongol Yam stands as a testament to human ingenuity in solving complex communication problems. You can now let the image of the vast steppe, the thunder of hooves, and the tireless Yam rider gently recede. The sounds of ancient hooves fade into the comforting quiet of your own space. Feel the warmth of your covers, the gentle support beneath. You release any lingering thoughts of imperial decrees or galloping horses. The day's history lesson is complete, and the night is here to hold you gently. Let your breathing slow, deep and even, like the gentle lapping of waves on a distant shore. Imagine the softest moonlight filtering through your window, casting a silver glow, reassuring and calm. Allow your eyelids to grow heavy, a comforting weight, signaling the final surrender to rest. Drift away on that feeling, knowing that sleep is a gift and it is now yours to embrace.